From maps that lie to us to history books filled with outdated information, we've been fed geography myths for years, and most people still believe them. Let's reveal 25 facts that are straight-up lies, but we are growing believing they are true. 1. English is the official language of the United States. Most people assume that English is the official language of the United States. But the truth is, the US has never declared an official language at the federal level. While English is the most widely spoken language, the US is actually one of the most linguistically diverse countries in the world, with over 300 languages spoken. Some states, like Hawaii, where Hawaiian is also official, and Louisiana, which has a strong French-speaking population, even recognize multiple languages. Despite efforts to make English the official language in the past, no law has ever been passed to confirm it federally. So, while English is the dominant language, the United States remains officially language neutral. 2. Everyone in the Middle East speaks Arabic. When people think of the Middle East, they often imagine a region where everyone speaks Arabic. But that's completely false and a fact that is a straight-up lie. The Middle East is actually linguistically diverse, with multiple major languages spoken across different countries. Iran speaks Persian Farsi, which is completely different from Arabic. Turkey speaks Turkish, a language that has no connection to Arabic. Israel speaks Hebrew and English, not Arabic as its main language, and Afghanistan has Dari and Pashto, not Arabic. Even in Arab-speaking countries, regional dialects can be so different that people from different countries struggle to understand each other. So the idea that everyone in the Middle East speaks Arabic is completely false. 3. The Amazon rainforest is empty. Some people believe that the Amazon rainforest is just an uninhabited jungle, but that's far from the truth. The Amazon is actually home to over 400 indigenous tribes, many of whom have lived there for thousands of years. Some of these groups, known as uncontacted tribes, have never interacted with the modern world. They rely on the rainforest for food, medicine, and shelter, and their way of life has remained largely unchanged for centuries. So, rather than being an empty wilderness, the Amazon is actually one of the most culturally rich places on Earth. 4. All of China eats with chopsticks. When people think of Chinese cuisine, they immediately picture chopsticks, but did you know that not all of China actually uses them? In Western China, regions like Xinjiang and Tibet have a diet that consists mostly of bread, rice, and meat-based dishes, which are traditionally eaten with spoons, forks, or even hands. Chopsticks are mostly used in the eastern and southern parts of China, where rice and noodles dominate. So, while chopsticks are an essential part of Chinese culture, they aren't used by everyone in China, especially in the western regions where food traditions are different. 5. All Mexican food is actually Mexican. If you love hard-shell tacos, burritos, and nachos, you might be shocked to learn that they're not actually Mexican. These foods are part of Tex-Mex cuisine, a fusion of Mexican and American flavors that originated in Texas. Real Mexican food is very different. It focuses on soft corn tortillas, slow-cooked meats, fresh ingredients, and complex sauces like mole. In fact, Tex-Mex food is so different that many Mexicans don't even recognize burritos or nachos as authentic Mexican dishes. So next time you eat at a Mexican restaurant in the US, remember, it's probably more Tex-Mex than real Mexican cuisine. 6. All Middle Eastern countries are oil-rich. There's a common belief that every country in the Middle East is wealthy because of oil, but that's completely false. While countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Kuwait are rich in oil, others, like Jordan and Lebanon, have little to no oil reserves at all. Instead, they rely on tourism, banking, and trade for their economies. In fact, some Middle Eastern countries actually struggle with poverty because they lack oil resources. So, while oil has made some nations extremely rich, not all Middle Eastern countries benefit from it. 7. Mount Everest is the tallest mountain in the world. Another lie that many of you believe is a truth. Everyone thinks Mount Everest is the tallest mountain in the world, but that's only half true. Everest is the highest peak above sea level, but if you measure mountains from their base to their peak, Mauna Kea in Hawaii is actually taller. Everest's height is 29,032 feet above sea level, while Mauna Kea's total height is 33,500 feet. including its base under the ocean. That means Mauna Kea is almost a mile taller than Everest. While Everest is still the highest point on land, Mauna Kea holds the real record for the tallest mountain on Earth. 8. The Sahara Desert is the largest desert. Most people assume that the Sahara is the biggest desert in the world, but that's actually wrong. A desert is defined by low precipitation, not heat. That means the largest desert is actually Antarctica, which covers 5.5 million square miles, nearly twice the size of the Sahara. Even crazier, the Arctic is the second largest desert, meaning the top two deserts on Earth are both freezing cold. The Sahara is the largest hot desert, but it's nowhere near the largest overall. 9. The UK is not just England. Many people use England and the UK interchangeably, but they are not the same thing. The United Kingdom consists of 4 countries that are England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Each has its own culture, history, and government, and people from Scotland, Wales, or Northern Ireland do not consider themselves English. If you ever refer to someone from Scotland or Wales as English, you might get a very angry correction. So remember, England is just one part of the UK, not the whole thing. 10. Europe and Asia are really separate continents. Europe and Asia are not truly separate continents, but they're actually one giant landmass called Eurasia. The idea that Europe is a separate continent is more of a historical and political decision than a geographical fact. The dividing line is usually said to be the Ural Mountains, but there's no real natural separation. Countries like Russia, Turkey, and Kazakhstan actually span both continents at the same time. If continents were based purely on landmasses, Europe and Asia would be the same continent. 11. Africa is much bigger than it looks on maps. Most people underestimate just how massive Africa really is. The Mercator projection, the most commonly used map, distorts the sizes of countries, making places near the poles look much bigger than they actually are. Greenland looks nearly the same size as Africa, but in reality, Africa is 14 times bigger. You could fit the US, China, India, and most of Europe inside Africa and still have room left over. This map distortion makes countries like Russia, Canada, and Greenland appear far larger than they actually are, while Africa and South America appear much smaller. So, if you've been underestimating Africa's size, it's because maps have been lying to you. 12. Mount Everest is just in Nepal. Most people believe Mount Everest is entirely in Nepal, but that's not true. Part of it is also in China. The Nepal-Tibet border runs right through the summit, meaning both Nepal and China technically share Mount Everest. Most climbers take the Nepal route, as it's the most accessible and popular, but China has its own path to the top. Interestingly, Nepal and China can't even agree on the mountain's height. China claims Everest is slightly shorter than Nepal's measurement. Either way, Everest isn't just Nepal's mountain, but it belongs to both countries. 13. Brazil is all rainforest. Brazil is famous for the Amazon rainforest, but it's not all jungle. In reality, over 40% of Brazil's land is grasslands, savannas, mountains, and coastal regions. If we look at an example, the Cerrado is a vast tropical savanna, home to rare wildlife. The Pantanal is the largest tropical wetland in the world. The Caatinga region is a dry, desert-like ecosystem. While the Amazon covers about 60% of the country, there's a lot more to Brazil than just rainforest. It has one of the most diverse landscapes on Earth, from beaches to mountains and even deserts. 14. The Bermuda Triangle is a mysterious danger zone. The Bermuda Triangle has long been associated with mysterious disappearances, but there's no real scientific evidence that it's more dangerous than any other part of the ocean. Studies show that ships and planes disappear at the same rate in the Bermuda Triangle as anywhere else in the Atlantic. The real reason for accidents is unpredictable weather, strong ocean currents, and human error. Many famous disappearances were due to bad storms or mechanical failures, not supernatural forces. The US government and scientists have both confirmed that the Bermuda Triangle isn't special or dangerous. It's just another part of the ocean. 15. Iceland is covered in ice, and Greenland is green. The names Iceland and Greenland are completely misleading. Iceland is actually full of green landscapes, hot springs, and forests, while Greenland is 80% covered in ice. So why the confusing names? The Vikings supposedly did it as a trick. Some believe they named Greenland that way to attract settlers, making it sound like a lush paradise, while Iceland was named to scare people away. But actually, Iceland has a milder climate and is much easier to live in, while Greenland is mostly frozen tundra. The names couldn't be more opposite of reality. 16. You've never actually seen an accurate world map. Every map you've seen is wrong. Most world maps use the Mercator projection, which massively distorts country sizes. Greenland looks as big as Africa, but in reality, Africa is 14 times larger. This distortion happens because the Mercator map stretches landmasses near the poles, making countries like Russia, Canada, and Greenland look enormous, while Africa and South America appear much smaller. If you want to see the world's true size, check out the Gall-Peters projection, a map that shows countries in their actual proportions. The world isn't how you think it looks. 17. The International Dateline is not a straight line. Many people assume the International Dateline, IDL, is a simple straight line, but it's actually a zigzagging mess. The line bends and curves to avoid splitting countries and islands into different time zones. For example, Kiribati moved its time zone forward so it could be the first country to enter the new millennium. Even some islands that are geographically close to each other are actually a full 24 hours apart. The IDL is not a perfect line, but it's a weird, politically influenced border that makes time travel feel real. 18. The Great Wall of China is visible from space. A popular myth claims that astronauts can see the Great Wall of China from space, but that's completely false. Even NASA has confirmed that the wall is barely visible from low Earth orbit and completely invisible from the Moon. The problem is that the Great Wall is long but extremely narrow. From space, it blends into the landscape. Astronauts say cities, highways, and even airports are much easier to see than the Great Wall. So, if you believed this myth, it's time to forget it. 19. The Leaning Tower of Pisa is the most tilted building. The Leaning Tower of Pisa is famous for its 4-degree tilt, but it's not the most tilted building in the world. That title belongs to the Capital Gate Tower in Abu Dhabi, which was engineered to lean at 18 degrees, over 4 times more than Pisa. Even a German church, the Surhusen Tower, has a bigger tilt than Pisa. So, while Pisa is the most famous leaning structure, it's nowhere near the most tilted. 20. The Amazon rainforest is the lungs of the Earth. You've probably heard that the Amazon rainforest produces 20% of the world's oxygen, but that's completely false. The real oxygen powerhouse is the ocean. Tiny marine plants called phytoplankton produce over 50% of Earth's oxygen. Even crazier, the Amazon consumes nearly all the oxygen it produces through decomposition and plant respiration. While the Amazon is essential for biodiversity and climate balance, it's not actually the lungs of the Earth. 21. Big Ben isn't a clock. People call London's famous clock tower Big Ben, but that name only refers to the giant bell inside. The tower itself was originally called the Clock Tower, but was renamed Elizabeth Tower in 2012. The actual clock face is just part of the structure. Big Ben, the bell, chimes every hour, but most people mistakenly think it refers to the whole tower. So, next time someone says, "Let's visit Big Ben," remind them it's a bell, not a clock. 22. The Eiffel Tower was supposed to be permanent. The Eiffel Tower is now a symbol of France, but it was meant to be torn down after 20 years. Built for the 1889 World's Fair, the French government planned to dismantle it by 1909. Many Parisians hated it at the time, calling it an ugly metal eyesore. But the tower stayed because it was useful as a radio transmission station. Today, it's one of the most visited landmarks in the world, but it almost didn't survive. 23. The equator is the hottest place on Earth. It seems logical to think that the equator, where the sun shines directly overhead, would be the hottest place on Earth. But that's completely false. The hottest places on Earth are actually found in deserts like Death Valley, USA, the Lut Desert, Iran, and the Sonoran Desert, Mexico, USA, where temperatures have reached up to 159 degrees Fahrenheit, 70 degrees Celsius, on the ground. This is because humidity, ocean currents, and rainfall around the equator help regulate temperatures, making many equatorial regions surprisingly cooler than you'd expect. 24. China is the most populated country in the world. For decades, China was known as the world's most populated country, but India officially surpassed it. With a population of over 1.4 billion, India now holds the title of the most populous country on Earth. Meanwhile, China's population is actually shrinking due to low birth rates and an aging population. Many experts predict that India's population will continue growing, while China's will keep declining over the next few decades. So, if you still think China is number one in population, that's now outdated. 25. Australia is full of deadly animals everywhere. Yes, Australia has venomous snakes, giant spiders, and deadly jellyfish, but the idea that dangerous creatures are everywhere is a complete exaggeration. In reality, most Australians go their whole lives without encountering these animals. Cities like Sydney and Melbourne are just as safe as any other major city worldwide. The chances of being bitten by a deadly snake or spider are extremely low. You are more likely to get injured by a kangaroo or stung by a bee. So, while Australia does have scary wildlife, it's not as terrifying as Hollywood makes it seem. And there you have it. 25 geography facts that turned out to be complete lies. Do you know someone who still believes one of these geography lies? Share this with them and see if they can handle the truth. The world is full of amazing facts, but it's also full of misinformation. Keep questioning, keep learning, and never stop exploring. See you in the next video of Earth Basics.